Hello and welcome back to America's Forum here on Newsmax TV. We're going to turn our attention to Obamacare right now. And one of the challenges to the president's signature law coming from outside of the Beltway in Washington, D.C. A Texas physician has created a firestorm in the Lone Star State suing the federal government over Obamacare. Movie hopes that this physician will help bring back the health care law to the Supreme Court and hopefully overturn it. We're going to bring in Nick Tate, who is the author of the best-selling Obamacare Survival Guide. Nick, you know, we've seen how politicians in Washington have tried to challenge this law, try to defund it. And there's also some challenges coming from outside of Washington, the one out of Oklahoma and this one we just mentioned here out of Texas with Dr. Hotze. Do you think that these external challenges might have more success? I do.
I don't think that the political arguments are really working in Washington, as we've seen. You know, the House Republicans have voted 42 times to repeal Obamacare, and it's going nowhere in the Senate. But I do think some of the technicalities and the legal specifics, what the opponents legally are charging is the way the law is written. There are these problems, and you know, looking at the specifics of the law, checking with legal scholars, they have some pretty strong legal grounding. So I think they might actually have some success.
Now, the question would be: the Supreme Court has already essentially litigated this law one time. Why would they do that again?
That's really the question. But you know, in some ways, what Dr. Hotze is arguing is that the ruling of the Supreme Court in 2012 defining Obamacare as a tax law is the foundation of his suit, which argues that because it's a tax law, Obamacare should have originated in the House and not the Senate, and as we know, the Affordable Care Act originated in the Senate. So his argument is because of the Supreme Court's ruling, in fact, they have to throw it out legally.
Yeah, and there were a lot of, you know, when all of us were trying to make sense of the Supreme Court ruling, some people were giving John Roberts, the Supreme Court Justice, so much credit for doing something like this, setting up a situation like this. But there have also been some, you know, a lot of people saying that nobody could be that, have that much foresight.
Right, right. Well, there were some of the folks that were looking at the political ramifications were thinking that he was really setting it up to fall, even though he, on the surface, was ruling in favor.
Now, we talked about the Dr. Hotze's challenge in Texas. There's also this one out of Oklahoma. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Well, what it argues is that the way the law, again, this is one of those questions about the way the law is written, and you know, maybe we should revisit what Nancy Pelosi had to say about this in terms of we need to pass the law to see what's in it. Well, one of the things that's in it requires that the subsidies that are giving on the federal exchange, on the affordable health care exchanges can only go in those cases where the states run their own exchanges. The anticipation by the authors of Obamacare was that the states would run these affordable health care exchanges. But in most of the states, 36 of the states, the federal government is running them. So the language of the law appears to suggest that those subsidies can't go to those states, and those states can't enforce the mandates of the law where the federal government's running them. And again, it's one of those technical legal arguments, but it seems to me that it's got some pretty good footing.
All right, well, continuing this conversation, we'll bring in Dr. Stephen Hotze, who's with us on the phone. He is the one filing this lawsuit out of Texas. Doctor, good to have you with us.
Glad to be there, John.
All right, give us
Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great. It's good to have you with us. Give us an update on your lawsuit right now and why you think it's going to be successful.
Well, the lawsuit is styled Hotze v. Sebelius. I'm a physician who has a health and wellness center here in Houston. I have 97 on staff, and they are all belong to a management company I have, and so they're leased out to my three separate enterprises. Now, and the reason we filed this lawsuit is because we're very concerned about its economic problems that it could bring, not only in our business, but in small businesses across the country. I have good accountants, good lawyers. An entrepreneur can kind of make his way around the law to try to mitigate it, so it doesn't cause as much damage as it would. Our rates are going up tremendously. So what I did is I filed a lawsuit May 7th, Federal District Court in Houston, Texas, in Nancy Atlas's course. 4 weeks ago on Friday, she ruled on it. The government made a motion to dismiss based upon procedural grounds. I didn't have standing. The case wasn't ripe. Interestingly enough, when Sebelius ruled in the case, she didn't grant their dismissal of the case based upon procedural. She said Dr. Hotze has legal standing and the case is ripe. But I agree with the government, she said, that Obamacare is constitutional. We figured she would do that because she was a Clinton appointee. We want to get in the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals is in New Orleans. It governs Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. It's the most conservative circuit court in the whole country by about 2 to 1. And so we made arguments on 2 points: the origination clause, that the revenue portion of this bill, the Obamacare bill, did not start in the House. It started as a tax credit in the House, not a tax revenue bill. It was shoved in the Senate, which was the Senate's end run around the origination clause. Why have an origination clause if you allow the Senate to do what the Constitution says it can't do? So that's our first grounds. And remember that Roberts said the fees were a tax, and taxes raise revenue. That portion of the bill was all formed in the Senate, and the dissenters in the bill said, if indeed, Roberts, this is a tax, then what about the origination clause? So we know that there's sentiment on the court that it violates the origination clause, although that wasn't adjudicated in the NFIB lawsuit. So this is a new grounds of challenging it. The second grounds is the taking clause. The taking clause is the Fifth Amendment. No government agency or entity can force a business to do business with another business. The government can steal your money through taxes and redistribute your wealth, but it can't force you to do business with another business. And so those are the two grounds of the lawsuit. We have filed an appeal in the Fifth Circuit. Briefs will be due on March 24th. Amicus briefs, friend of the court briefs in support of our suit, will be due on the 31st. Senator John Cornyn has agreed to and is working now on an amicus brief in support of our lawsuit. Of course, he's minority leader in the Senate. He has said he'll get all the Republican senators that he possibly can to sign on to that. Congressman Pete Sessions.
So Dr. Hotze, this is clearly gaining steam here, and just to take a step back, that was a very detailed description of where your lawsuit stands at this point, and you sounded more like a law professor right there than a medical doctor. Does it just? Well,
I did a year in law school.
Okay, fair. I was going to say I'm very impressed by your ability to break it down for us. I also want to bring in Nick Tate, who is a health editor with Newsmax Health and also the author of the Obamacare Survival Guide. He wanted to ask you a question as well, Dr. Hotze.
Doctor, thanks for being with us today. My question for you is, why do you think the Supreme Court is going to be willing to revisit this issue? I mean, the composition of the court hasn't changed since they ruled in 2012. It was a fractious debate leading up to it, and there was a lot of reaction after. Why do you think they're not just going to simply say, been there, done that?
It's a perfect storm. These two issues, remember, the Supreme Court will often hear cases on a specific issue multiple times before they finally change a ruling. And we have different grounds. We have the origination clause and we have the taking clause, neither of which were addressed by the Supreme Court. So it's new issues. The key point is that we're in the Fifth Circuit, which is a conservative circuit. We feel very confident that they will rule on one or both of our issues in favor. Then the government has to decide, do they want to take it to the Supreme Court and chance it being overturned? How would it be overturned? By Roberts. Roberts could switch his vote. He's the one that said that the fees were a tax, TAX. And the dissenter said, if it's a tax, what about the origination clause? But unfortunately, nobody ever challenged it as being a tax because the government said it wasn't a tax. So we feel that the government will do one of two things. Either we win the suit in the Fifth Circuit, and they go, we're not going to challenge it on the Supreme Court. We'll let Mississippi and Texas and Louisiana go their own way, and we'll come back and get them later. Or else they can chance it and go to the Supreme Court where we feel that Roberts would switch his vote, and we feel like he teed it up for us.
All right, Dr. Hotze, we'll check back in with you later on as your suit continues here, because we do want to get an update, but right now we got to run. We got to go.
Okay.
We'll have more coming up for you here in the show. And also, do you support Dr. Hotze and his lawsuit? Go ahead and tweet us your answers. We'd like to hear from you, of course. You can always weigh in on any of our discussions that we're having here on America's Forum. You can tweet me directly at JohnB_Newsmax or direct your tweets towards Newsmax TV at Newsmax TV. And of course, you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Newsmax. We'll be right back with more of America's Forum after this.